Hello and welcome to Tea and Tights, the Great British Wrestling podcast for Great British Wrestling, as featured on the Jonas Podcasting Network and our very own YouTube channel now. I am joined this week by an incredible special guest. He is the young man that moved all the way to Scotland to train as a wrestler, working his way up to become the ICW champion. He's competed in over 12 countries across Europe, North America, and even Dubai. He's on his way to his first tour, Japan, with Big Japan Pro Wrestling. Please welcome to our show, Leyton Buzzard, El Capitan. Leyton
Thanks for having
Buzzard.
me on, mate.
No problem. How are you? And are you? I know you're going literally next week. So are you? How excited are you right now?
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good, man. So this week I've got my last weekend of shows this weekend, but then I've got like about 3 weeks before I head off. I leave just the sort of last week of August, so I'm finishing up my shows this weekend, and then I'm actually doing 2 weeks at the Edinburgh Fringe with the theatre wrestling show that I do called Mythos. And then after that, I've got 1 week after that to like prepare, get ready, everything, and then I'm off. So it's exactly a month today until I leave. But this weekend is my last weekend of shows.
Excellent. And of course, you've got Iron Girders and Wrestle Carnival this weekend, isn't it?
Yeah, and CPW. That's one of my good friend Ravy Davies. It's his wrestling company. I've got them on Friday. I've got Iron Girders in Scotland in Glasgow on Saturday, which is my last Scottish appearance of the year. And then Wrestle Carnival on Sunday, which is my last show before I head off.
Right. So now I'm going to start off this week because I live in Hertfordshire, which is very close to a town in Bedfordshire, and a
Yeah,
certain chant that you get from the UK crowd. So when you came up with the name Leyton Buzzard, were you aware of this, and or when did you become aware of it? What was the thinking behind the name?
yeah, I was actually, but one of my coaches came up with the name because they were wrestling down south in the town of Leyton Buzzard. They happened to be doing a show there, and it was maybe my second match, and I didn't have a name yet, and so I couldn't think of one. I wasn't very creative back then. I wish I was. But yeah, so they suggested this name for me, and originally it was just going to be for 1 or 2 matches to start off my career, and then it ended up sticking, and here we are 8 years later. But no, I mean I did know about the town because that's how I got the name. But it didn't become an issue until I started wrestling in London, because because it's pretty close. So the chant you're referring to specifically is when I wrestle in Rev Pro.
Yeah.
Most other places in England they're pretty cool with me, but me and the Rev Pro fans have a touch and go relationship.
It must have been the Rev Pro fans of the WXW show as well, then, because I was
Yeah.
there for that one. You got it there, too.
Yeah,
So
I
the
think
L,
just London in general. Yeah.
yeah, the El Capitan name. So is that a link back to your hometown of Bristol, which is quite famous for pirates and, of course, the Royal Navy?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It is one of the inspirations from it. Yeah. So I back in 2019, I started doing the captain gimmick in ICW. I was coming out with my cool pirate jacket and my hat and everything. But yeah, a massive part of that was the inspiration from Bristol, which is known as being a pirate town. If you know the novel Treasure Island, it's where the book starts off. And that's what Bristol was always famous for. It was always a port town. And I love Bristol. I love my hometown. So yeah, that was a massive inspiration for the character.
Awesome. Now, WXW have got you a bit of a semi-vampire gimmick by the looks of it, and now have they confused it with the town that I live nearby, which is Whitby, which of course was where Dracula came in?
No. So that was me. I guess down the line when I transitioned from the captain to El Capitan, when I started being a bit more dark, a bit more sinister, I did start leaning more into that. And that was because I'm sure you mentioned earlier on. I was in a video game, Castlevania: Lords of Shadows, and I played Dracula's son. So when I became when I started being bad again, I wanted to draw some inspiration from a darker side of me. So I started going down that route. I got some really cool Castlevania inspired gear from Dracula from that video game, and I started leaning more into that for my darker character. So and in WXW, that's more the character I portray there.
Yeah. Now, of course, you were a child actor, and did that help you get into that Castlevania job that you just mentioned?
Yeah. So I went to a professional theatre school in London, and the school was also, it had its own acting agency. So I was working from the age of 8 through to about the age of 17, 18. And most of that was through my agency. So I would get odd jobs here and there. I did all sorts of different work. People think being in theatre is just working in theatre, but it's not. I did everything. From theatre to commercials to language tapes to presidential no, what was that? I did a commercial for the Labour Party, like all these strange things. And it was just odd jobs you do auditions for, and sometimes you get them, sometimes you wouldn't. And then this one came up, and it was to be in a video game, Castlevania. And I remember at the time thinking, "Oh man, that would be super cool," because I'd never done anything like that.
Mm.
And when the audition came up, I went for it, and because I'd be going on normally at least an audition every 1 or 2 weeks. It was a very sort of common occurrence. I'd get a call from my agent, and they'd say, "Oh, listen, you've got an audition for this on Wednesday, blah, blah, blah. We'll send you the script for it. You need to learn this scene." Okay, cool. So, I'll be doing auditions, every couple of weeks. Normally, you don't get most of them.
Mm.
With theatre and with acting, it's a lot of rejection, and you don't get most jobs. But every now and then you do get one. That's how it works. And yeah, just the Castlevania one, I went for it, and I thought, man, this would be so cool if I got it. And I just ended up getting it. It was one of the ones I did get, and it was definitely one of the coolest things I've ever done. Whenever I tell people about my childhood and my theatre background, my acting background, it's always one of the first things I mention. Because to a casual person who doesn't know much about musical theatre, they're not that impressed by that. If I say I was in Castlevania, they go, "Oh man, that's cool." So that's it's one of the favorite things I did when I was younger. Getting to do motion capture, and the studio that we did motion capture in was the same studio that they did like loads of the Star Wars motion capture in. And I remember they had like some of the original lightsabers that they used from the films and all that on the walls. And I got like pictures of me like holding the prop lightsabers. So super cool experience. I think all in all, I was only there for maybe 2 days. But yeah, it was really cool. And you can go online and see the pictures of me in motion capture form, and it looks like me. It's got my face. There I am, Dracula's son. So yeah, it's a really cool part of my life that I love telling people about. And yeah, I loved it so much that it's now transitioned over into my wrestling as well. And I try to do that with a lot of my wrestling stuff. Is take inspirations from stuff that I've done throughout my life, because I like to think I've had a pretty interesting life so far. So I like to try and draw as much inspiration I can from my past as possible.
Now, one thing when you wrestle, when you make an entrance, you are always so composed, where some people can be a ball of energy, some people be a bit more nervous. Did that come from your theatre background, having that knowledge of how to, enter a room, how to control an audience?
Yeah, absolutely. When I was younger, I remember watching wrestling, and I was always more impressed by the men who controlled a room without really doing anything, just by their presence.
Mm.
Someone like the Undertaker who could just walk out the curtain, but straight away everyone's attention was on him just because he had that type of presence. So yeah, I always think that's a lot more powerful than coming out and shouting and screaming. I do a little scream, when I come out through the curtain for my music. But I also like to be calm and composed, because I think that's a lot more powerful. Being able to demand the attention of a room without doing much, and to have that presence, I think is a really cool quality, and it's definitely something that I've tried to put into my work.
Definitely something I feel that has certainly transitioned. Out of some of the people that you've wrestled with and competed against, who are people do you think could play a part on stage?
Oh, could play a part on stage. I'll tell you what. God, that's a hard one. I'm trying to think. I've wrestled so many people. I'm trying to think who gave me that vibe. I'll tell you what, the wrestling theatre show that I do, that I'm doing 2 weeks at the Edinburgh Fringe, Mythos, and it's about Vikings. It's about Norse mythology and all the Norse gods. I think one of my favorite people to wrestle, and one of my favorite people in the world, my coach, Wolfgang. one half of the NXT Tag Team Champions. I think he would be absolutely great in that, because I think he would be like the coolest Norse god ever, and I think he'd be the best Thor ever. So yeah, I'd love to see Wolfgang on that stage one day.
Okay, so we've seen people like The Rock and John Cena, Batista all come into action movies. Who on Brit Rest do you think could be an action movie star?
Could be an action movie star. Ooh. Listen, I'm not going to say Brit Rest because I'll get in big trouble with Ireland. Okay, but one of my good friends in Ireland, he's one half of a tag team, the Saviors of Destiny. Former Fight Factory tag team champions. They're now an OTT as well. One of the best teams in Europe. But one half of them, Andy Steele, a guy who's wrestled all over Europe. He's been around the block. We always make fun of him and say that he looks like an action movie star. He looks like Tom Cruise. He's got the slick back black hair, like the black wavy Hollywood hair. So yeah, I'd love to see an action movie with my buddy Andy Steele on it.
There we go. Somebody get cracking on that. Now, I was able to find out a little bit more information about you just through Wikipedia, but you're one of the only Brit Rest stars I've ever interviewed that's actually got a Wikipedia page. Did you know about this?
Yeah, I did. A couple of people have mentioned it to me. I thought it was pretty cool.
Seriously, yeah, I can't think of anybody else that I've interviewed where I've had a whole Wikipedia page to kind of work with, to have a look at what movies you had been in, and you're because I was like, I know he's been an actor, but what's he actually done? And so I thought I had to go check that out, and that's yeah, as I say, one of the only people we've had that's had a Wikipedia page. Now let's talk about wrestling.
Yeah,
of course, that's what we do here. We talk about Great British Wrestling. You moved at a very young age all the way to Scotland to train and learn to wrestle and try and get into ICW. Now, obviously, you had places like the Projo Progress or the Wrestling School in Portsmouth of Rev Pro. What made you choose ICW?
Well, so I was a fan of ICW. And I'd really got into the product. So I started getting into independent wrestling. I was a massive WWE fan for years. I was watching every bit of WWE I could watch. And at the time I was staying up until 4 a.m. every Monday to watch Raw, every Thursday to watch SmackDown. I thought it was Thursday at the time. And I was staying up to watch every bit of WWE programming. And then I'd watch WWE documentaries. And I remember watching the documentary about CM Punk, and that's how I found out about Ring of Honor, So I started watching Ring of Honor, and that was like my first sort of intro into like independent wrestling. And I thought, man, this is amazing. This is crazy. So I really, really got into Ring of Honor. And then I remember watching a Finn Balor documentary. It wasn't a WWE one. It was like a mini documentary. I think it was independently made, about him in his like last few weeks before he left Japan and went to America to wrestle for NXT at the time. And I remember he was sort of doing his like farewell tour, and he's going to all the promotions that he works at regularly and saying goodbye. I remember one of them, and it would say in the bottom corner, credit to whatever company it was. And I remember seeing the ICW one, and I thought I didn't know anything about British wrestling. I didn't really realize it existed. I knew about sort of the tribute shows and town halls and stuff like that, but I didn't realize there was an actual wrestling scene. And then I remember seeing the ICW ring. And I thought, man, that looks really cool. It was like the black canvas with the red ropes, and it had the logo in the middle. And I looked, and it said it was in Scotland. I was like, that's crazy. I didn't realize that there was any sort of major wrestling promotions in the UK. And then I looked up ICW, and then I found out I don't know if you remember the BBC documentaries about ICW, the Insane Fight Club documentaries, and I saw them. There was two of them. I was like, this is crazy. And then I saw that Drew Galloway was the champion. And I grew up watching, Drew McIntyre on TV. I'd watch him on SmackDown, and I'd watch him on Superstars every weekend. I remember for a good while for us wrestling fans in the UK, once they took SmackDown off Sky One. The only wrestling that we could watch, unless you had Sky Sports, which we didn't, the only wrestling you could watch was like on Sky One on like a Saturday and a Sunday. You had it was like WWE Rewind and WWE Superstars as well. And Drew McIntyre was at the time on Superstars every week. And then he wasn't. I was like, hang on, this guy's the champion of ICW. And I was like, this is crazy, you know. And then I looked up their shows and I saw some stuff on YouTube. And I was like, these guys are wrestling in front of, 1,000+ people, these massive shows. And then I subscribed to their on-demand service and I started watching their shows and really, really getting into the product, sort of similar to what I did with Ring of Honor. And then I went to go and see NXT Takeover London in back in, I think, 2015 it was. It was the first WWE pay-per-view event in the UK since what, Insurrection or something like that. Long time. And I got the train down to London by myself to watch to the main event. At the time, Finn Balor was my favorite wrestler at the time. I was a massive Finn Balor guy. It was him that got me into Japanese wrestling as well. And it was him and Samoa Joe in the main event. God, I remember watching that. And watching Finn Balor make his entrance. And I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. It was that night. I was like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So I went home that night. I looked it up. I found ICW. I looked up if they had a training school, and they did. I found out the page, Glasgow Pro Wrestling Asylum, that was advertised as their official training school. And I was like, that's it. I'm signing up. This is me. I'm moving away. I was like, just watch Finn Balor in the main event of NXT Takeover London, and he was a former champion at this company. I've been watching this company, and I was like, this is where I want to start my journey. They were just on the lead up to the first Hydro show they did, which was the largest independent British wrestling show since Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks. Set over 7,000 people in the Hydro, and I moved up to Scotland in the lead up to that show. So it was, undisputedly the biggest company in Europe at the time. So yeah, it was a no-brainer for me. It was the company that I loved watching. It was the product I enjoyed the most. I found out they had a school for me, and I was like, right, this is it. This is the start of my journey.
Now, your first match was against Kez Evans for Iron Girders, and now, of course, you went on to defeat him for the ICW World Champion. Did it feel a bit of like a full circle when that happens?
Yeah, it was cool. So my first match as Leyton Buzzard, as the Leyton Buzzard character, was against Kez Evans in at Glasgow Pro Wrestling Asylum. That was our original school. I'd only been wrestling maybe 6 months or so, and I picked up the win in that match, my first match. And we had a rivalry for years. We were always sort of tied together. We were always the two guys in GBWA. So Leyton and Kez, we'd always get similar opportunities coming up in ICW at the same time. And we were even in a faction together for a bit in ICW, and always our names are sort of there together. So yeah, it was a really cool moment to not only win the ICW title, but to beat Kez Evans for it. Yeah, because we'd always had that rivalry, and our names had always been tied together. We came up through Asylum at the same time, then we came up through ICW at the same time. So yeah, it was a very cool moment for me. I think it was the perfect opponent.
Is it when I first started kind of watching ICW through the WWE network and really seeing yourself, Kez Evans, Craig Anthony, and Daz Black, and I'm thinking, oh, these are natural guys who are going to take ICW to that next level, because obviously ICW had lost quite a lot of their Joe Coffey and Wolfgang, as you mentioned, and to NXT UK, and then even Shah Samuels and Rampage. But you guys really stood out and was just like, yeah, star presence. These guys are going to help take ICW hopefully to that next level. And we kind of saw that on the return, and with their big Shug's House Party 8 coming up, certainly looks to be on an upswing at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that as an opportunity. Oh, sorry. I saw that as an opportunity when all these guys were gone, and Wolfie was gone, and the Coffey brothers were gone, and they couldn't wrestle at ICW anymore because obviously we were in COVID, and the NXT UK guys could only wrestle for NXT UK. And I saw that as an opportunity. I thought, okay, well, looks to me like ICW needs a top guy, so that's going to be me. And I did everything in my power to make that happen.
And as you say, it came full tuition. You defeated Kez Evans. Before that, of course, you did become an ICW 0G champion. So that was the second championship you've run in your long tenure so far. Is that right?
With ICW, yeah. So I originally won the 0G championship back in 2019. That was cool for me because that was when I really moved up to Glasgow. Like, that was the championship I wanted to win. Finn Balor was Zero G champion, and then Noam Dar, he was also Zero G champion. Those are the two guys I was really getting into watching. So I was like, right, that's the championship I want to win. And then, I obviously I like the idea of the World Heavyweight Championship, but it wasn't realistically the Zero G was what I thought was more suited for me. And I won it. I accomplished what I set out to do. And then after I won this, I had that same feeling, whenever I accomplish anything good in wrestling, and it's what's next. I'm a very goal orientated person, but as soon as I do one thing, like the first thing on my mind is what's next. I'm never satisfied, which is a blessing and a curse.
You've got to keep pushing it. And then, of course, this kind of saw you finally move into back into England to make a show where you started wrestling for PCW, actually becoming their cruiserweight champion as well.
Yeah, longest reigning PCW cruiserweight champion history.
And you lost the belt to a Canadian young man who you've kind of gone on to have quite a friendly rivalry with in Form Vertigo. Is that right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, he's a rival and a friend. He's a great guy. He's a terrific wrestler. We became friends when he first came over to the UK. Years ago. Well, he'd been over a few times, but me and him became friends, and just like-minded people. At the time, we did a couple shows with PCW, not wrestling each other, just meeting. And then eventually the next time he came over, we got to have the match together. Or just before lockdown, I believe it was, we had the match together at Blackpool Tower was the first one. It's amazing, beautiful venue. And then we got to have the match again after lockdown when he came back over. And at that time, it was for the Cruiserweight title. He beat me for the Cruiserweight title. And then, a year down the line, and we're wrestling each other at WXW 16 Carat Weekend for the ICW World Heavyweight Championship. So, he's a guy that helped me out greatly. When I was going over to Canada, and going over to Wrestling Canada, he helped me out so much with, set me up with different promoters and stuff like that. So, but yeah, friendly rivalry. Every time we step into that ring, there is that competition there, because we're both, from different sides of the world, but we both got that similar mindset, and I love wrestling because you meet a lot of people like that.
So you went from being a young student, ICW champion, Zero G champion, now ICW heavyweight champion, and you got a chance to kind of reestablish it as a world title following the COVID pandemic by taking it to places like Dubai, to places like Canada. What was the pride like to do that for the company and be able to represent for ICW like that as a world champion?
I mean, it was awesome. Like when I first won that title, like I said to myself, I was like, I'm going to do everything I can to make this championship reign mean something. I thought, I don't know how long I'm going to have this championship for, but I know I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that people remember this reign. And in my head, I already knew when I got the championship, I was like, I want to be a traveling world champion. I was like, that's going to be my gimmick. I was like, I'm going to travel around the world and I'm going to defend this championship. And in my head, I remember thinking Drew McIntyre, right? He defended the title in 7 different countries. I said to myself, I'm going to defend it in 8. I said, I'm going to defend it in more countries than Drew McIntyre. I'm going to break his record. And I did. And what was even more cool was my last international defense was in England. I defended it in England. In my hometown of Bristol, wrestling for Pro Wrestling Chaos. It was my first time wrestling in Bristol in like over 5 years. My first proper match in Bristol, and it was defending the World Heavyweight Championship 2 minutes down the road from where I grew up. So it was such a special time in my life, getting to represent the company and defend this championship all over the world. I defended it in 2 different continents, 8 different countries. I got to travel the world, do what I love, and be champion in the process. Wrestling's fun. And it's always more fun when you're winning. So it was cool to travel the world. Defend that championship with honor. Get to, I didn't get to travel as a kid growing up or anything. Me and my family, we went camping once a year. Which I wouldn't change for the world. I had some of the best memories of my life, but I didn't get to go abroad and anything like that. So now as an adult, I'm getting to travel the world, getting to do what I love and do it as world champion. It was a time of my life I'll never forget. I'm so grateful for it. I'm so happy that after my reign, I think I accomplished what I set out to do. I think
Mm.
it's a reign that people will remember. It's I put my name down in history as one of the great ICW champions, one of the great ICW world champions. It's something I'll never forget, and I hope it's something the fans will never forget either.
I don't think it can be forgotten. It was a fantastic reign, and as you mentioned, defending it in so many different countries. Because as soon as the pandemic kind of ended, you took over the UK with OTT, Rev Pro UK, and so places. But then you were in SAJ Wrestling in Italy, WXW, first with the Academy, then in 16 Carat with Germany, Rings of Europe Austria against the team of CPF.
Yeah.
I had 6 promotions in Canada.
Yep.
WrestleFest in Dubai, Black Label Pro Wrestling in USA,
Yep.
Freedom Wrestling in Sweden, and Lucha Libre Barcelona in Spain.
Yeah, and IPWA in Israel as well. I wrestled in Israel. That was my first ever international show.
That is quite incredible. And as you say, to accomplish it, from being a child actor to wrestle to actually go on to do all of that. What's the differences in crowds compared to around the world for the UK? How's it different to some of those other countries? Or how do some other countries just differentiate themselves?
It's different everywhere you go. There's so many great crowds. My personal favorite crowd would be Dublin. I think Dublin wrestling fans are awesome. It's my favorite place to wrestle. I've got a really special relationship with the fans there. But yeah, like it's a really cool thing getting to travel the world and see all these different fan bases because it is so different. Like so in Dubai, for example, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, there's only one promotion in Dubai, and they only run once a month. So it's like that one show is the only chance that wrestling fans in Dubai have to see live wrestling. So it's WrestleMania to them. It's not in the UK when they've got 100 shows on every weekend all over the UK that they're spoiled for choice. They can go and see. If you're in the UK, you can go and watch some of the very best wrestlers in the world every single weekend at any show you want.
Yeah.
If you can travel, you can go and see literally some of the best wrestlers on the planet every single weekend. But in Dubai, you can see this show once a month, and that's it. So it's like the fans there are like so appreciative, and it's a really cool feeling because I'm doing moves that I do in the UK that get that people cheer for, that people pop for. In the UK, people have seen all my stuff, they know all my stuff, they know what I'm gonna do. Whereas in Dubai, they'd never seen it before, so I'd hit something and I was like, oh, this is awesome chance and all that, and I was like, oh man, this is really cool. So yeah, it was that type of crowd I love when they're just so appreciative. Similar in Israel as well. There's only one company over there, so to get to go to these countries that have so little live wrestling available, and to then put on a show for them, to do what you do best, and put on a show for the fans over there, just like I would in the UK. It's an amazing feeling. You walk away and think, wow, I really made a difference to this person's, to this person's month, to this person's week. They got to see some live wrestling, and yeah, that's some of sometimes they're my favorite crowds. Wrestling in front of a crowd that doesn't get to see much live wrestling because they are so much more appreciative of it. We're appreciative of it. Whereas in the UK, I'm sure we can all admit that we're a bit spoiled for choice. We've got some of the best companies in the world. We've got some of the best wrestlers in the world. Live wrestling is so readily available. And I think sometimes people take that for granted. And me as wrestlers, we take it for granted as well. But then, yeah, when you go to a country that has one wrestling company and they only run once a month, and you see how passionate the fans are there, it brings you back down to earth, and makes you think how lucky we are in the UK.
Yeah, I think somebody worked out per capita, we have more wrestling shows running every weekend than anywhere else in the world. And it's ridiculous considering how small of an island we actually
we're
are.
a tiny little island. Yeah, it really is. It's crazy.
You can be anywhere you want in 5 hours ish.
Exactly.
It's absolutely ridiculous. It's
And any weekend, you can go and watch Leon Slater wrestle, who's like just an absolute freak, like a future world champion. When he's in the country, you can go and watch Will wrestle on the weekends. You know, it's like the level of talent over here is just ridiculous. And yeah, we are definitely spoiled for choice. But yeah, I love wrestling all over the world and get to see different crowds as well. Canada, some great crowds in Canada. I wrestled the first weekend I was in Canada. I wrestled for a company called Superkicked. Awesome company, and they run right in the center of Toronto. It's one of the only companies that runs downtown Toronto. It's right in the center, and it was on Friday, and it was St. Patrick's Day. So it had this really, really cool feeling. It reminded me of like old school ICW because it's in this nightclub, this sort of like music hall nightclub in downtown Toronto, and everyone there is like a casual wrestling fan. It's like more like a night out rather than just a wrestling show. You know, people are going there for a good time. And yeah, they were just like, it was St. Patrick's Day. The atmosphere was amazing. And yeah, similar to like when I was in Dubai, I was doing all my usual stuff, you know, but the reactions were 10 times louder. So, you know, that was one of the coolest fan experiences I've ever had, actually. You know, that crowd there, St. Paddy's Day in downtown Toronto, Super Kicked Wrestling, man, that was a hell of a crowd.
Now, you brought up his name, so we'll have to ask the question. You got to face Will Ospreay in the ring, one-on-one, one of the best wrestler in the world right now. What was that like?
Man, you know, it was just the experience of a lifetime, you know, and it all happened so fast. You know, for any British wrestler who came up at the same time as me, Will was the man. You know, he is the man who everyone in Britain aspired to be. You know, you watch him going over, you know, winning back-to-back Super Juniors, and then transitioning to heavyweight, and you know, just dominating Japan, and just doing. He was doing everything that a young aspiring wrestler wanted to do. And then yeah, it happened so quickly. He put out this promo. He'd just come back from Japan, and he put out this promo. I think he'd just lost the Rev Pro title or something. So he put out this promo saying, you know, I'm not champion anymore. I'm not doing, you know, defenses anymore. I want to wrestle some of the best wrestlers in Europe, some of the best wrestlers in the UK. And he said, who wants to go? And yeah, everyone was putting up tweets, retweeting it, saying, oh yeah, you know, come and fight me. And I was like, ah, man, you know, I was like, someone should do a promo. And then one of my coaches, one of my former coaches, and a good friend of mine from Scotland, Red Lightning, Rudo, he shot me a message, and he was like, you know, you should do a promo. I was like, yeah. I was like, I don't know. I was like, he only wrestles for Rev Pro in the UK at the time. Will was like exclusive with Rev Pro. He didn't wrestle anywhere else in the UK. And I was like, I don't think Rev Pro. That, you know, they've got all their certain guys, and you know, I've sent them a bunch of emails before, and I've not got any replies. So I was like, I don't think they're going to use me. And then he was like, what's the worst that they could say? No. And I was like, yeah, I was like, you're right. And, you know, I thought to myself, I was like, you know, worst comes to worst. He doesn't see the promo, but it's good content for my social medias, you know, get some good traction online. So I thought, yeah, fuck it. Oh, sorry. I thought, yeah, I'll do the promo. I'll film it. If something comes of it, something comes of it. So I filmed and this is a complete shoot, by the way. You know, people were messaging me asking me like, oh, is this a storyline? All this. I was like, no, I just shot my shot. Shot for the stars. And, then I woke up the next day, and it got a bunch of views. And Will Ospreay had liked it on Instagram. He didn't follow me on Instagram. You know, I was under the impression in my head. I'm thinking, I was like, this guy doesn't know who I am, Will Ospreay. You know, why would he know who I am? You know, I'm all the way up in Scotland. You know, like we've never met before. He's got no reason to know who I am. But he liked the post on Instagram. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. You know, loads of people were you know, sharing it and tagging him. So I thought, you know, he must have seen it. I was like, oh, that's cool. And then the next day I woke up and my friend had sent me a message, and they were like, go on Twitter, like go on Will Ospreay's Twitter. I like, well, all right. And I went on Will Ospreay's Twitter, and he just tweeted my name. He sent out a tweet, just said Leyton Buzzard. And I was like, man, that's crazy. I was like, he must have seen my promo, he must have liked it. And then I remember I was down in London at the time. I was outside of King's Cross Station. I was just about to get a train to the airport to head back home. And I got a message, an email from Andy from Rev Pro, and it said, "Hey, we saw your promo. How would you want to come down and wrestle on this show against Will? We think it'll be a great starting point." We'll see where we go from there. I was like, man, I put this promo up 2 days ago, and now I'm wrestling Will Ospreay in the main event of Rev Pro in my debut. And the graphic was up within 2 days, and it was like within like less than a week from me putting out that promo, there was a match announcement for me wrestling Will Ospreay in the main event of my Rev Pro debut, and it was just happened so far. And then the match was like 2 weeks later. So it was like I didn't even have time to process what was actually going on because it happened so fast. And then the match was everything I wanted it to be. Couldn't have asked for a better match. I got to go my Rev Pro debut, and I went 25 minutes with the best wrestler in the world. I showed everyone that I could hang with the best wrestler in the world. And Will, he's just an absolute pro. He's at the top of the game for a reason. And then after the match, he picked up the microphone and he said, Andy, I want you to give this guy all your dates. He said, I want this guy to be a full-time member of the Rev Pro roster. And he didn't have to do that. That wasn't. He could have just done the match and booted me out the ring like he does with most of his opponents, and then gone on our ways. But he didn't. He took the microphone. He went out of his way to help me. And what do you know? I was heading off to Canada the week after for a month, so I went to Canada for a month straight after. But Andy said, he was like, message me when you're back. We'll figure something out. And I was like, all right. In my head, I'm thinking, you hear that from a lot of promoters, like, oh, we'll get you on the next one. But no, then what do you know? I come back and that was when the run started with Rev Pro. I came back from Canada and straight away, that was one of the first shows I did when I came back. And I had this run with Rev Pro with this feud with Michael Oku, and like all of that stemmed from that match with Will and him just doing what he didn't have to do. He didn't owe me anything. He doesn't know me. He didn't have to do anything for me. But he went out there and went to war with me in the main event of my Rev Pro debut. Put me over on the microphone after. Said that he wanted me to be a full-time roster member. And it paid off. So it's really just an experience that I'll never forget. And Will's such a good guy, and he's been someone that's like been there for me for advice. Like after that match, whenever I've seen him, he's always given me advice. Whenever I've dropped him a message, he's always got back to me any questions I have. So just such a good guy and such a positive role model to everyone in the British wrestling scene. And I think he's someone who, even though he's spending most of the time now in Japan, America, he cares about British wrestling so much. And he cares about lifting British wrestling up so much. So he's just a really cool person to be around. And I couldn't be more grateful that I got to have that opportunity to, when I was thinking about this the other day, and in 10, 15, 20 years time, I'm going to get to say that I wrestled Will Ospreay in his prime. And that's pretty cool, because when you think about the legacy that he's left and already, and he's just turning 30. And you think about the legacy.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, like you think about the legacy he's left already. Like he's going to be one of the all-time greats by the time his career's over. So that's something I'll always be able to have. I'll always be able to say, in 10, 15, 20 years time, I wrestled Will Ospreay in his prime. It was just, the experience was everything I wanted to be and more.
I think there'll be more opportunities, hopefully, in the long term. But of course, that angle with Michael Oku that you mentioned, that was an incredible angle. It was one of their main stories leading up to one of their biggest pay-per-views. And they gave you a nice little send-off as well, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was great to see. Now, I want to bring us back to WXW Germany when Kraus called 16 Carat Weekend, one of the biggest festivals in Europe. You got to be part of it as a showcase against Form Vertigo. What was it like being there for the entire weekend, or for that weekend?
Oh, that was really one of my favorite weekends I've ever had in wrestling. And it came about, so I really didn't expect it to come about. I did one show for I trained for WXW at their training school back in like 2019. I did a week training there with my buddy Ravy Davey, and then when I was starting to really branch out last year and trying to wrestle in as many companies as possible, with WXW being you'd say like in mainland Europe, you'd say that the premier promotion, that was obviously one of the first companies that I was trying to get a hold of, and I did get a hold of them. I got in contact, and they said to me, "Oh, we suggest that you come over and you do some training at the school first, so you can they can get to see you and get to see who you are." And I said, "Oh, I actually went over and did some training in 2019." And they're like, "Oh, cool." They were like, "Well, if that's the case, we've got this opportunity for you that it might, you might be interested in." And I went over and I did a show for them. It's just it was a show at the academy. It's their Fight Forever brand. It's like these shows that they do for YouTube. Obviously they're on the WWE network, but they do these free shows for YouTube. Do you want to come and do one of these? I was like, yeah, absolutely, man. It means I can say that I wrestled for WXW. I got to wrestle Peter Tiani, who's like one of the top wrestlers in Europe right now. He's like phenomenal talent.
My wife's favorite wrestler is Peter Tiani.
Yeah. I don't doubt that, man. I don't doubt that. But yeah, we had a great match. Got to meet some of the guys over there and get some really good feedback, some really good advice from the guys over there. And I thought it went well. I didn't think it went that well. I thought, hopefully they're happy with it. I was main event, which I was really happy with. I was like, oh man, my WXW debut, I'm in the main event. That's super cool. And then I thought they were like, oh, stay in touch. Good conversation after. Thanks for coming over. Stay in touch. And I was like, cool. I will. So I was planning on sending another message over in a month or so. And then I got a message like 2 weeks later, and they're like, "Hey, I think I won the ICW title next week." So I wrestled. I had my WXW debut, and then the following week I won the ICW championship. And then right after that, I think maybe the week after, I got the message from WXW, and they were like, "Hey, we were wondering if you wanted to do something at 16 Carat Gold, like with the ICW championship." They said we do this show, this WXW showcase, which is like from all these different companies around the world, and they all have a match on the show. They're like, do you want to defend the ICW championship at 16 Carat Gold? And I was like, I mean, obviously, yeah. But yeah, it literally just came about from doing that one show for WXW, and then a WXW Academy show, and then 2 weeks later, I'm booked at 16 Carat Weekend, like the biggest wrestling weekend in Europe. And man, that was a hell of a weekend to be a part of, because if you go back online and look at some of the names who have been at 16 Carat, it's like a who's who of wrestling now, and we're talking about like the guys who are main event in WWE and AEW, like huge names that were at this weekend. So it was one of those things as a wrestler, really is like a bucket list thing, especially as a European wrestler to do. And when I went over, I remember just the level of professionalism for how this whole weekend is ran. It's such an amazing event. They've been running it for so many years now that everything's down to a T. I remember the this is a bit nerdy of me, but I remember the coolest thing about the weekend for me, which made me realize, I was like, oh man, this is the big leagues. Was right before, like a week before, they send you this entrance pack, and it's like this email with like all the details you need to know about your travel, flights, hotels, all of this, and it's all put in this amazing document, and everything's itemized and all this. And I remember looking at that and I was like, man, this is so professional. Normally it's just a message from a promoter, like see you there. But no, I think everything about that weekend, it's so well ran. It's like a well-oiled machine, and just to be a part of it was so cool. So there were so many amazing talents on that year. Obviously, I got to do the showcase show, and then I was on their episodic show the next day as well. The We Love Wrestling. And that got to be on the network, so that was cool. But I got to stay for the whole weekend as well, to just be a part of it and to watch the matches, and to watch Shiggy win, and he had this amazing run. He then went on to win it, just like see this amazing reaction, and just watching for the crowd it's such a special thing to be a part of. And I really suggest any wrestling fan or any wrestler, really try and make a point of going to WXW 16 Carat at least once. Because man, it was one of the best weekends of my life. I'll never forget it. And I really hope to go back next year or in the future.
No, I remember I went for World Tag Team Festival the year before the 60 Carat that you went to, and I was writing for bodyslam.net. And even the way they treated you as media was just so great. You had a media lunch the night before, you got to meet everybody else who was there to do the writing or do a podcast or so forth. All the day before, got to see around the academy and so forth. And what they do is just so everything they do is so just regimented and professional, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
absolutely love it.
The German fans are so passionate as well.
Mm,
So yeah, just a really great weekend to be a part of, and just an amazing experience.
absolutely, especially the fans, you say, because they're a mix between like Japanese and British fans. They'll bring in some chants, but they'll also quite happily just sit there and kind of analyze and watch what you're doing as well.
Yeah,
Very on the game and very enjoyable to chat with after shows and so forth. So yeah, definitely agree with that. Now you're off to Japan.
yeah, man.
There's a lot of people, a lot of Europeans and UK guys taking over Japan right now. Endakara, our last guest, just finished a tour. BJW is heading back out there, possibly around the same time you are. Agil Blanc's just making his debut for BJW and All Japan Wrestling as well. Tristan Archer's out there. Then, of course, you got Jack Morris over at Pro Wrestling Noah. Chris Ridgway, Saxon Huxley, so many other Brits, and you're now in a long line of great British wrestlers who get to go out to Japan.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. When I started wrestling, I was 18 years old, and for me, that was my long term goal. Like my short term goal was I wanted to win the ICW Zero G Championship. That was like my short term, and I did that. And my long term one was like I wanted to get to Japan by 25, and I get to Japan 3 weeks before my 26th birthday. So sometimes the universe has a way of working things out. And yeah, it's just this. I feel like for me, this is everything I've worked for. I feel like everything I've done over the last 7 years has been to get to this long term goal so that I could get to Japan. Because all my favorite wrestlers and all the wrestlers I aspire to be like all carved a name for themselves in Japan before they went to America, and they all came up through Japan. And to me, I believe that's where the best wrestling in the world is. The best in ring. You talk about professional wrestling and sports entertainment. I think the best professional wrestling in the world is in Japan. Um, and that's where I wanted to be. I knew that's what I needed to do. I knew before I could do anything, I had to get to Japan, and it just became this obsession. Um, and then last year, Jack Morris who's from Scotland as well. We both wrestled together in ICW, and we went down to do the PCW shows as well. And then he got Noah. They did this big like online application, like they were saying, Noah's recruiting worldwide. So I knew a bunch of people applied for it. Like me and loads of friends have messaged each other, like, oh, did you apply for that Noah thing and all that? And then Jack Morris got it, and I was like, man, that's crazy. Couldn't have happened to a better person, and he's absolutely killing it over there. But it was so close to home, that one, because it was like, we're wrestling on all the same shows in Scotland. We're driving down in the same car down to PCW to do shows down in England, and here Jack is, and he's going over to Japan to wrestle in the N1 for Noah, doing all these amazing shows, and it was so close to home. Like for me, that was really when it was like, I've got to make it happen. When I saw Jack in Japan, I saw him doing so well, smashing it. I was like, man, I need to make this happen. And from that moment on, that was when I really stepped up my game, and I was like, I'm gonna do everything I can to make it to Japan. Because I was like, right, if we were on all the same shows, Jack's made it. I was like, I'm gonna do everything I can to make it as well. And then this I ended up having the best year of my career. Wrestled in 15 countries worldwide. I was wrestling regularly for WXW, Rev Pro, OTT, ICW. Really the biggest companies in Europe. And I was doing everything I could to make a name for myself over here, and everything I could to like establish myself as a main player in European wrestling. And all the time while this was going on, I'm reaching out to companies in Japan. I'm trying to make these connections. I'm trying to figure out how I can make it over there. And then it just happened. I think it's been a long process. maybe at the start of the year, me and BJW, we started talking back and forth. I started telling him my goals, what it is I want, how I want to go to Japan, not just to wrestle, but to train as well. So for the big thing, the big thing for me was like I didn't want to just go to Japan to wrestle. I want to train in Japan as well. Because I want to be the best possible wrestler I can be. And then maybe I think it was maybe in March or April, I got it confirmed. They messaged me and they said, okay, we'd love to have you over to come and to train at the dojo. You can stay in the dojo, you wrestle on the shows. And we made it happen. We got the date sorted. They're like, how do you want to come in August? So yeah, I'd known for a few months. I've been sitting on it for a few months before the announcement came. But it was just I couldn't be more excited for anything. This is the crowning achievement of my life. This is everything I've done for the last 7 years has been so I can make it to Japan, and make it to Japan by 25, and here I am. And 3 weeks before my 26th birthday, I arrive in Japan. I get to do everything what I always wanted to do, which is live in the dojo, train in the dojo, accompany them to the shows on the weekend, wrestle on the shows on the weekend. I'm eating, breathing, sleeping, wrestling for close to 6 months. So it's just going to be the experience of a lifetime. And it's like I said, the universe has a way of working things out. The timing's perfect. I'm ready. I'm the best wrestler that I've ever been. I've been on the top of my game for the last year, and the stars aligned, and it's happening. So yeah, I absolutely can't wait. BJW's a great promotion. They run really one of the most regular running shows in Japan. They run a huge amount of shows. So I'm going to be doing 10 plus shows a month whilst I'm over there. So yeah, I can't wait to be a part of this company with such a rich history, and such links to European wrestling as well. BJW's had that partnership with WXW in the past as well. We've seen that talent exchange of guys like Daisuke and guys like Volta, Gunter going over. So yeah, I'm really really happy, really proud, and really honored to carry on that legacy of wrestlers going over to wrestle with at BJW. So I can't wait.
And you're being joined by Tempesto, who's actually Bobby Gunn's older brother. He's a big lad. Now, talking about big lads, in the UK, you have kind of developed into a heavyweight wrestler. But we've seen Drilla Manoni, who is an absolute beast, as a junior heavyweight in Japan. Do you know if you're going to be in the junior heavyweight or in the heavyweight division yet? We were discussing this on the last podcast episode.
Yeah, so well, I'm going to be wrestling all different types of players. So I'm going to be in all different types of matches. But yeah, predominantly, I will also be competing in the Strong J division at BJW, which is their junior heavyweight division. Yeah, but from what I've heard from management over there, I'm going to get to wrestle all different types of wrestlers, all different types of players. I'm going to be in all different types of matchups, which means I'm not just going to get to wrestle junior heavyweights. I'm going to be in there with heavyweights. I'm going to be in there with the deathmatch wrestlers, not doing death matches, but I'm going to get to share the ring with them. I'm going to get to, so I'm really going to get to wrestle as many different people as I can. I think that's the best way to do it, because I'm not just going to be, wrestling the guys in one division. I'm going to get to wrestle all these different styles and all these different players. So yeah, I couldn't ask for a better setup.
So I'm not going to follow in Drew Parker's footsteps then.
No. Yeah, each to their own. I did one death match in ICW, and I always said to myself that it was one and done. But that's one question I've actually got a lot over the last month. Since it's been announced, BJW, they're like, doing death matches. I was like, no, not for me. I love deathmatch wrestling, and I have the utmost respect for deathmatch wrestling. But I couldn't do what they do. I think it's amazing what they do, but I couldn't do it myself.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to obviously seeing you in Japan. As you say, we had Endakara on the other week, and he hinted at a British star who was going to be out there around the same time. So it must have been yourself he was talking about.
Endakara he's a great guy and a great talent as well. We've known each other for maybe the better part of a year now. We met at my very first WXW show that I did, and I remember seeing him going over to Japan. And I remember seeing him smashing it. And it was funny enough when I first messaged BJW, um, I was messaging Ender just about. I just dropped him a message saying I think he had a big match. He was wrestling Kota, who was the BJW Junior Heavyweight Champion. And I messaged him to say, good luck for the match or something like that. And he messaged back and he said, oh, just to let you know, he's like some of the guys at BJW were asking about you. He was like the management were asking me if I knew you. He was like, yeah, he was like, obviously I told them that I did, and you're a great wrestler and all that. I was like, wow, that's amazing. So that was like the first time I'd heard that, BJW had any interest in me, So, but yeah, he's a great guy, great talent as well, and it's going to be awesome to be over at the same time as Ender. I think maybe he's going about a month after me, but we'll be meeting up over there. Maybe we can do something in the ring together as well. That'd be pretty cool.
I'm sure you'd make a great tag team over there. Now you mentioned you got 3 big matches coming up this weekend before you go. Community Pro Wrestling,
Yep.
The Iron Girders match, and then of course Wrestle Carnival. Are you looking forward to those last 3 sort of matches?
Yeah, I am. It's a great weekend. It's a great weekend to finish things off. Then I'm having a couple of weeks of fun at the Edinburgh Fringe, doing Mythos, and then a bit of downtime before I go, just to get in the right headspace. Really solid couple of weeks of training. Getting everything ready for Japan. But yeah, I'm very excited to have like a good send off weekend. I'm glad that Japan was announced before as well. So I can sort of say goodbye to the British fans who've really given me everything that I have over the last year. If it wasn't for the passion of the fans, I wouldn't have got where I am today. So it's been such an amazing year. And it really, this is literally a year since I made like my international debut. So I pinpoint that my international debut was like as the start of this crazy year I've had. And then for this crazy year I've had, for everything I've done, WXW, Rev Pro, OTT, wrestling all these different countries, wrestling Canada, to finish it off by getting accepted to Japan and getting to go over and wrestle in Japan. It's the perfect ending to the perfect year. And I just can't wait for this new chapter. And yeah, I can't wait to have this last weekend as well, to get to say goodbye to the fans in Scotland who have been there for me since day one. Before anyone in the UK knew who I was, before anyone in London was doing silly chants for me, or the fans in Dublin were screaming their heads off for me. It was the Scottish fans who were there for me. So it's going to be a really special moment to get to say goodbye to the Scottish fans for now, and to have that last match against my biggest rival in Scotland, Kes Evans, and then to get to return to Wrestle Carnival and say goodbye to the English fans as well. I'll be gone for the remainder of the year, so these are going to be my last shows in British wrestling of 2023. But I'll be back in 2024. I'll be back, with a bang for sure.
I'll get to see your last match live because I'll be there for Wrestle Carnival doing their
Oh,
media
it's
parts.
awesome.
So I'm really looking forward to seeing you versus Lance Rivera, a young man who's very much on his way up at the moment. But if you could pick 4 young guys that you would enter into, say, Progress's Natural Progression tournament or BWR's Breakout tournament, who are 4 young wrestlers you would pick right now?
Man,
Or who do you think needs more attention?
who needs more attention? Okay, one definitely is a wrestler from Ireland, Martin Steers. He's the current Irish Junior Heavyweight Champion for Fight Factory. He beat me for the championship, and we just my last Fight Factory show there. Or the one before, we wrestled 25 minutes in the main event for the championship, and he's such a good talent. He's taken over Ireland, and now he's branching out into Europe as well. So he's a talent I'd love to see on there. Um, from Scotland, let me think. Well, there's a tag team at the moment in Scotland who are doing really great. A tag team called Casino Brutal. 2 guys, Robbie Romero, Mikey Devine, and they're just 2 great guys. They've got the right attitude. They've got the right that level of grind, that level of graft that you need to make it. And their promos recently have been absolutely stellar. So there's 2. I'd put them as the tag team. And then, I'm trying to think who. I feel like Leon Slater's too obvious, man. He's outgrown that now. He's even though he's only 18, he's just on a different level already. I think what number 4 would be Martin Casino Brutal. Man, I'll tell you what. He's another Scottish boy. Well, he's like me. He's an English boy in Scotland. A lot of people find him very, very annoying, especially at Soft Pro. But my boy Ian Skinner, great talent, great guy. He's got the right drive. I'd love to see him on more shows. He's starting to branch out. He just made his OTT debut at the last Contenders show. He's really trying to start to get himself out there. But yeah, he'd be my number 4 pick. For the up and comers that I'd like to see getting more attention.
We're big fans of Ian Skinner. He's been on our show twice now because we do love Ian Skinner. He is quite hilarious to have on the show, and as you say, the way he's putting himself out there at the moment on any social media platform, he's really done a great job of that. Let's quickly talk about Soft Pro because they've really done a lot in a short time to establish themselves. And you're part of the collective. Now, is it because you were originally from Bristol? Because I couldn't understand the connection at first with a lot of Southern wrestlers and you and ICW.
No, we were just a group of people that came together. We came together on that first show, and we were sort of from all over the place. I think that was what was cool about the faction. We were from different parts of the UK, but we all had the same mindset. But I've loved being a part of Soft Pro, man. They're really cool shows. I really love the company. I really love the direction they're going in. And I think in the next couple of years, like Soft Pro is really going to cement itself as one of the top promotions in the UK. And yeah, I'm still repping the collective. I'm off to Japan for now, but I'll definitely be back at Soft Pro in the new year. I know they're going to smash it. They've got a show coming up in October. I know they're going to keep smashing it out of the park whilst I'm gone. The collective, they've got it locked down, but they'll keep it safe till I'm back. But I'll definitely be back at Soft Pro in the new year.
I'm sure they'll give you some t-shirts to go sell in Japan with the collective on it.
Yeah.
It is, to be honest, it is one of the coolest factions in wrestling at the moment. You just you've all got the same sort of matching gear. They've made an effort to make you look like a faction, and I like that. And as you say, they're doing so much with so little time. One of our last little questions we love to ask is about the British Mount Rushton. Now, you can go as far back as you want to WOS days, or you can be more modern. Who do you think's really helped influence British wrestling?
Man, so all time, Okay, man, this is there's so many. So I'm gonna go number 1. It's got to be Bulldog. In terms of influence, he was repping the UK flag for everyone back then. Especially with it's appropriate. With All In Weekend coming up as well. That Bulldog and Hart had that amazing match. So yeah, Bulldog would be number 1. Number 2, I'm going to throw out there Drew McIntyre. Obviously from Scotland. Controversial in Scotland because most people up here like to be called Scottish, not British. But it is part of Great Britain, and I think the influence that he's had, he's Scottish, but he's also the first ever British WWE champion. And I think the influence that he's had on so many people, as a kid growing up, I remember seeing him on TV and thinking, wow, this is crazy. He's from the same little island as me. And here he is, wrestling the Undertaker on SmackDown. And to have that story when he went away, became the top name in independent wrestling, and then went back, wrestled Brock Lesnar in the main event of WrestleMania, won the WWE Championship. I think that influence is just unparalleled. Number 3, I'm gonna go Nigel McGuinness. In terms of in that independent level, throughout the noughties, if you want to talk about wrestling, British wrestling outside of WWE and the majors, Nigel McGuinness is your guy. He was really carrying that torch throughout the 2000s as the top British wrestler in the world. Had some absolutely legendary matches with obviously his match with Danielson in the UK, just ridiculous. Such an amazing story. and to see him still thriving in wrestling today, obviously not in a wrestling role anymore, but still having such an influence, and now getting that respect now from the major companies later on down the line, is such a cool thing. I think he's just an amazing wrestler and such a positive role model for British wrestling, as what you can be as a wrestler outside of WWE. I think he's the perfect example of, you don't always have to make it to WWE or a major company to be a successful wrestler. Look at Nigel McGuinness now. He's still so respected and so revered. Here I am putting him on my my Mount Rushmore of British wrestling. And then number 4, got to be Will Ospreay, man. If we're talking about future British stars, in 10, 20 years, I think Will Ospreay is truly going to be viewed as one of the all-time greats. So he's for sure my number 4. Yeah. So for me, British wrestling all time number 4. I'm sure there's other people, you're going to say Big Daddy and all this. This is my personal list.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not saying this is the best. I'm not saying I'm just saying this is my personal list. Bulldog, Nigel McGuinness, Drew McIntyre, Will Ospreay. That's my 4.
No, I like that. If you've seen, possibly if you've seen some of my old episodes on bodyslam.net, when they released this top 10 of British wrestling and they had Big Daddy at number 1, I complained. I didn't like it. I respect how big he was as a personality and whatnot, but when you look at all the incredible British wrestling talent, he doesn't make my list either, so I'm fine with it. But Bulldog is quite a regular name on the list, but Drew McIntyre, I think he might be the first, and that seems weird. Sure, there must have been somebody else who said Drew in the past, but Nigel's usually on a few people's lists as well, and you do get people. And you had Joel Redman on the show, and he started going on about wrestlers I'd never even heard of.
Yeah, like each to their own, man. This is just my personal picks.
Yes, exactly. Now we normally ask, where do you want to conquer, Europe, Japan, or the United States? You've done Europe, you're about to do Japan. Have you got your eyes set on the States already? Have you already got a few promotions that you might have already tried to speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. For now, 100% of my time and effort is dedicated to Japan. For the foreseeable future, this is what my time and my effort is going to be dedicated to. I'm very much, all of my effort is put into one thing. But yeah, absolutely, in the future, it is the goal. Like, I feel like a lot of people say, oh, maybe that's not the goal, or that's not what they want to do in the future. But for me personally, I grew up watching WWE. I became a wrestling fan because of WWE. And I'd be lying and I wouldn't be true to myself if I didn't say that obviously wrestling for WWE one day is the goal. I don't know when that's gonna be, but hopefully someday that is the goal, that is the dream. But there's so many companies I want to wrestle for in America as well on an independent level. I'm choking to get back over to Canada because it's such a good scene over there. There's a couple of companies I didn't get to wrestle for whilst I was over last time because they just weren't running shows whilst I was over there. So Smash and Destiny are the 2 that I'd really like to do whilst I'm over there. And then in America, there's you got so many companies killing it right now. Obviously, GCW, Limitless is another big one. Defy, huge. And obviously, it's cool to see them sort of doing like joint shows in the UK now as well. But I mean, the big one, I'd love to do, because back when you first get into independent wrestling and you first start watching independent matches, PWG was always the one that popped up. Whenever you'd hear about these crazily wrestling matches, PWG was always that company you'd hear about. And that was I remember out with Ring of Honor. That was one of the first independent companies I'd heard of. So I'd definitely like to do PWG at some point, and I would love to wrestle in Mexico. That's a big one for me as well. I'd love to be able to say that I've wrestled in like all the biggest markets of wrestling around the world, to say, I've wrestled in Japan, I've wrestled in America, I've wrestled in UK, and I've wrestled in Mexico. To me personally, they're the 4 like really big markets of wrestling in the world. So I'd love to be able to say that I've had like a stint in all of them. So definitely at some point in the future, Mexico's on there as well.
Do you reckon WWE will live up to possibly doing a WrestleMania in the UK, or do you think that's just too far out of reach?
Oh, come on, man. They've got to now. Now John Cena said it. They can't go back on it. You know? Yeah, absolutely. I think within 2-3 years they'll do it. I think especially now with All In Weekend, I think that's gonna look very lucrative to them. Seeing the ticket sales for All In and seeing what a success this is, it showed them, and the success of Clash at the Castle as well. I was lucky enough to be there live for that one, to get to watch that show, and that there is that market for these wrestling super events in the UK now. The UK has showed for years now what a passionate fan base we are. So I think now they've proved that they can put on these super events in the UK, and people are going to come to them, and they are going to pay money to see them. So I think WrestleMania happening in the UK in the next few years is an absolute no-brainer. And now John Cena's put it into existence. They can't go back on it.
Okay, do you think a British promotion can do what the guys at AEW once did and put 10,000 fans in the UK arena or stadium?
I think absolutely. I think, in however many years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, I think there's absolutely no reason why British wrestlers couldn't do that. I know, so the level of talent in the UK right now is insane. And like I said, there's so much of it. You can go and see so many of the best wrestlers in the world. And I think now, at the rate these guys are going, the rate that guys like are going over to wrestle in America and going over to wrestle in Japan and making a name for themselves all over the world, the name value of British wrestlers is just going to keep going up until they are at that level, of what the Young Bucks were, back then, and Cody Rhodes and Kenny Omega, and they were such big names that they were able to sell out a show with 10,000 tickets, that very first All In. So I think absolutely, in 5-10 years, there's no, even less, there's no reason at all why I couldn't see a group of British wrestlers selling out a venue of that size, because we've got the talent for it. There's absolutely, the talent's here, and now we're getting that recognition. Now this new wave of British wrestlers who have come through post-pandemic. After all the wrestlers have got signed, we've got this new wave coming through post-pandemic. We're making waves, and we're showing everyone that the UK produces the best wrestlers on the planet. So I think in a few years' time, 100% we could run a show at that level.
I love to hear it, because I absolutely agree with you on that front. I think the level of talent that's come out of the UK in the past 5 years, and as you say, post-pandemic in particular, the amount of young, incredible guys that you could literally call prodigies in wrestling, including yourself and what you've done with ICW, I think 100% it should be done in the future. I've had you on for a good hour and 15 minutes, and I feel like I should probably wrap this up. So is there anything, any merch you need to get rid of before you go, and where can people buy it?
No, there's not, not now. I'll sort that when I'm back. The only thing I want to say is just thank you to all the fans in the UK who supported me over the last year, over the last 7 years, 8 years, however long I've been wrestling. Thanks to everyone that supported me on my journey, whether it be wrestling in Ireland, whether it be wrestling in the UK, in England, in Scotland, in Germany, over in Canada, America. Just thank you for making noise and for believing in me, because it's let me live out my dream, and it's let me do everything I want to do. And here I am, about to go to Japan. I'm gonna fly the British flag with pride, and show all the fans that they didn't make a mistake. But yeah, just thank you to everyone who supported me over the last year. I'll be gone for the rest of 2023, but I'll be back in 2024, and I'm going to be back a different animal. I'll tell you that right now. And yes, it's going to be a great time. So thank you to everyone for supporting me.
That leads perfectly into my usual lead of keep supporting British wrestling, keep supporting European wrestling, keep supporting independent wrestling, and remember to support independent podcasts that support independent wrestling. And
exactly.
just remember, don't feed the trolls.